Hello, and welcome back to Super Hell, aka the Mysteries Podcast, a show where two recovering Supernatural fans subject themselves to a rewatch so no one else ever has to watch Supernatural again. I'm Klaudia, my pronouns are she, her, and you can find me on social media at Klaudia Says, K-A-L-U-D-I-A Says.
And I am Ollie, I use any pronouns, and you can find me on social media at Ollie Fresh. Klaudia and I were talking just before we started recording about how if we didn't start recording we would just talk about Destiel for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow, these two episodes
these two episodes are the kind of episodes where my partner Claire was trying to leave the house and they kept getting distracted by how gay it was. They were like, wait, do I have to watch this show? And I was like, no, don't be tricked. But know that I am going crazy and I'm going insane.
It's not, I would say these are two classic episodes.
Yeah.
Both of them have moments in them where you're like, oh my God. This is literally, I think, the epitome of how we were talking about in our last episode, how it's you'll be listening or watching season 5 and you're like, oh, this sucks. And then you're like, oh my God, Destiel.
No,
these are the, oh my God, Destiel episodes.
Yeah. And it's I'm going to talk about it a little later, but all of Destiel, obviously there's the pieces that we talked about, but a lot of the groundwork for how the fandom has conceptualized Destiel are in these episodes. Mm-hmm. There are some lines in here, there are moments in here that you have definitely seen on Tumblr.com or anywhere
absolutely.
else, frankly.
Yeah.
It's legitimately, there are moments where you're like, why did they direct it like this?
Yeah. I think it's also it's just written in such a way that you're like, oh wow. Because it is it's in the episode, so we will talk about it, but this is where we first get Cass and Dean for real being on the same side
and by themselves.
Yeah, and it's oh my god.
It's legitimately crazy making in a way that I know we never say this on the podcast, but if there are episodes you're gonna watch, watch maybe one of these, because then you can understand the level. We'll try to convey it to you. Don't watch the whole show, but if you want to understand why is it crazy making, and then you watch these two episodes and you go, oh, there's something going on there, and that's all you need to know. Yeah. I don't want to promote watching this show, but
I would say specifically the first episode and then maybe the last 15 minutes of the second episode, because all right.
Oh God.
Excuse me.
Season 5, girl.
Season 5, you're so confusing to me.
Yeah, it's also, I just want to say, I know we've talked about these books before on this podcast in my little segment I like to call pieces of media that you should consume instead of Supernatural, but there's a series of books called the Angels trilogy. The first one is called Angels Before Man, and the second one is called Angels and Man. The first one, Angels Before Man, is a retelling of the fall of Lucifer, and the second one is a retelling of the Watcher's flood. So it's Bible fan fiction, like Supernatural, except it's better. I recently read the second one, and the second one, if you don't know the story of the Watcher's flood, is about the angels who come to Earth and basically fall in love with humans and cause the humans to then be damned by and they are also, but damned by God, and that's why the flood happens, Noah's Ark, etc. And then watching this right after, and I did all of it for you. I felt crazy. I felt insane. I was like, what do you mean Destiel is a retelling of the Watcher's flood? I have to end it all.
Is it? Or did you just say that because you just read something about the Watcher's flood?
No. There's some things where you're like, oh. Because especially there's some lines, and especially in these two episodes, about when he's talking about searching for God and searching for having faith, and how they switch it up, and
Let's okay.
Okay, I can't. I
don't
get
talk
it.
about it.
Yeah.
We haven't. The listeners don't have context yet, and we
They don't
need
have
to provide them
context.
with some context.
Yeah.
We need to do. We love that here.
So anyway, read the Angels trilogy by Raphael Nicolas instead of watching Supernatural, even though we are about to sound literally insane about these 2 episodes.
Fuck. Okay, so let's do it. This. So this is season 5, episode 3. It's called Free to Be You and Me. So
I wonder who the you and me are in this instance.
Yeah, I mean we may never know, So the episode starts and we see Sam, and he's in bed, he's sleeping. And he kind of like rolls over in his sleep. And if you'll recall from the last episode, he basically was like, I need to take a break from hunting. I have to get away. And Dean's like, wig, I think that is probably a good idea. So Sam is like, I'm going to be a normal boy now. So he's like lying in bed, and it's a motel room. And he like hears something, and he turns around, and who is laying next to him in bed? Jessica. If you'll remember, Jessica was Sam's girlfriend, who died in like the first episode of the show. So he's like, oh my God, like, Jessica, you're not real. You're like, this just has to be a dream. And she goes, well, does it really matter what I am? I miss you so much. And he's like, oh my God, like, I miss you too. They just have this very like heartwarming reunion. And she's like, why are you you're really running away from this? Or he's like, yeah, well, this is so much different from when I ran before, like when I ran away from you, because like, I know what I am now. And Jess is like, no, you knew what you were even when we met. The first time we said hello, I was dead. Like, you knew from even when we were at Stanford that there was something dark inside of you.
I just want to say, I just had another thought. This episode is another instance of Sam with a woman paralleled against Dean with Destiel, and certain things being said or occurring that I just want people to keep in mind.
Oh my God.
As we go along. Oh, the first time I met you, I knew that I was doomed. I have to end it all. Anyway.
Oh my God. Anyway, I'm trying to have a Sam Jess moment. Can you please keep your gay shit out of here? Anyway. So they're having this conversation. She's basically saying, like, you knew from the moment we met, you knew from way before you had some darkness inside of you. And he's like, no, like, I can change like this. I'm going to leave hunting behind. She's like, it will follow you. You can't run from what you are. You can't run from this. The past is always going to catch up to you. And the people you care about are going to be the ones who pay for it. They are the ones who are going to die. And he's very resistant to this. He's like, no, like, that can't be. And then suddenly she vanishes. And he looks around and he's alone again in bed. And something else I gotta say is that he is shirtless. And I swear to God, so they have these anti-possession tattoos on their chest. I swear to God that thing moves every time you see it. Because it was like,
absolutely.
Like, it was like so high up on his chest. I was like, that is not correct.
I believe that this is the start of like the hot Sam season where they're trying to sexualize him all the time. I mean, they're always trying to sexualize him, but like this is in his like peak hot Sam era, and I was a Sam girl briefly. And they also, every time they have a woman who's supposed to be dead, she's always in a white nightgown. Happened last episode, happened this episode. You're like, what's going on?
Yeah, we need to free Supernatural from the clutches of the white nightgown. I'm like, girl, it was 2009. Nobody was wearing that shit. Anyway, but it was just it's interesting because I do think that this is when Sam finally, like, I think last season was really when it started, but when it was like, oh, Sam's not like the little kid, and like, he's not a kid, he's a grown man, and he's got abs. He's got a six-pack. It's like, oh,
the little
shit.
brother. Yeah.
Oh. But, yeah, but it's a very, like, I felt myself getting emotional during this scene. Then we get the title screen, Supernatural. We get a scene that says 1 week or a screen that says 1 week earlier. And that says 1 week earlier. And the song Simple Man by Lynyrd Skynyrd starts playing. And this is actually a really good montage because we see Sam. He is like burning all his fake IDs, and he is like walks past this restaurant that says like busboy needed, or it's like a bar and it says busboy needed. So Sam goes like in and like gets a job, and we see him doing all this stuff. But as this scene is progressing, we are flashing between Dean, who's hunting by himself. He shows up, he has like his fake badge, and is like, I'm here to talk to the patient who like lost a lot of blood. And then we see like we cut between scenes of Sam doing all these menial bar tasks and Dean hunting and killing these vampires. And there's a scene where this made me laugh because Sam is like chopping up a lemon at the bar, and then it cuts to Dean and he says, eat it, Twilight, as he kills a vampire.
But 2009 ass joke.
Literally. But it's cut in the same way. So it's like as Sam cuts a lemon, it cuts to Dean cutting down on the vampire. It's a really like well put together sequence.
Yeah. Also, the first time we see Dean, he is getting out of the car and he's pulling out a knife, and it looks like a pretty like, I don't know, oldish. It's not like a kitchen knife. It looks like, I don't know. It looks kind of sword looking. And it's like, oh, because we're harking back to finding out that Dean is the sword of Michael, the vessel for Michael. Yeah. And I'm like, they kind of ate with that. They ate with this sequence.
Yeah. This was a really good sequence. I also had to stop because I'm like, Sam is a busboy who cleans tables, right? And I've had a lot of friends who worked in the restaurant industry. Do busboys cut lemons? Should busboys be handling the food?
I think he's just a bartender.
No, he's the busboy.
Or he's bussing behind the bar.
Yeah, so he is, I don't know. I don't think he should be handling the food.
I don't think he's serving drinks. I think he's just like cleaning and prepping and stuff.
No, but he's cutting lemons.
Yeah, he's doing prep work for the bar.
Is that something you do? Okay, well, yeah, maybe I'm just being pedantic. Anyway, I love complaining.
I don't know. Any of our listeners who are bartenders?
I want to hear from listeners who are busboys. I don't want to hear, if you're a bartender, keep it to yourself.
Me to Sam. If you're a bartender, keep it to yourself.
Well, he's not a bartender, Klaudia. We get in a really big fight about this random fact in this episode that does not matter. Like, guys, the podcast is over due to irreconcilable differences.
BartenderGate.
I think you mean Busboygate.
There's something wrong with us.
I love Klaudia and I. We're having a mystery podcast divorce. Anyway,
no, I said to Claire that I joked that we should watch One Piece after this, and Claire was like, "It's gonna take you so long to get through Supernatural that your youngest niece is gonna be in college." I was like, "Damn."
Oh my god. Anyway, so all that aside, the last sort of scene in this sequence is Dean. He has now slayed this vampire. We've seen him cleaning a bunch of blood off of the Impala. He's back in his motel room. Holy shit, this scene is crazy. Dean is cleaning up his jacket. It has blood on it. He's dabbing it off. And he's standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom. And he stands up. And who is literally right behind him? Cass. He's like, he sees Dean. Dean sees him in the mirror and is like, Jesus, like, gets scared. And is like, okay, like, right. So he stands up. They are standing, again, so fucking close to each other. This is a scene you have definitely seen in a GIF, because Dean stands up, looks at Cass, looks down at his lips.
Yeah, and this will not be the last time.
Then looks away and says, we talked about this. Personal space. And he starts kind of walking away, and Cass goes, my apologies.
So close together. They are so close together. If you've ever seen an edit of Dean and Cass kissing where they edited them together, it's from this scene because they just moved them together.
And not even that far, maybe 6 inches closer. Cass is like obsessed with him.
They're staring at each other's lips in a way that's crazy style.
No, it's genuinely baffling. Like, it's like, oh my god, what
Why
the fuck?
Why did they direct it like this?
No, literally. And it's like, again, I've said time and time again, I'm trying to look at this like a normal person, but I'm like, what the fuck am I supposed to take away from this?
Like, it's
Anyway.
It's legitimately insane.
Anyway, Dean is like, so how'd you find out where I was? Because as you'll remember, Cass had put basically symbols on Sam and Dean's ribs that makes them impossible to track for angels. So Cass has had to like use normal methods to find them, but he didn't reach out to Dean or anything. So Dean's like, how'd you find me? And he's like, oh, well, I talked to Bobby and he told me where you were. And Dean's like, okay, great. So did you find God? Can I have my necklace back? And Cass is like, well, not quite. I haven't found God, but I think I have an idea of someone who can help us. And it's the person who killed, the angel who killed me, the Archangel Raphael. And Dean's like, so you mean to tell me you were killed by a Teenage Mutant Ninja Angel? And Cass is like, you know what? Right, okay, so please don't say that. And Dean's like, okay, so like, what is this? Like, is this for revenge? And Cass is like, no, it's not revenge. It's because he's an archangel. He would know more than a regular angel. He might have an idea where God is. So Dean's like, okay, that sounds really dangerous. He says, quote, so what? I'm Thelma, you're Louise, and we're just gonna hold hands and sail off this cliff together? I'm like,
excuse
Dean,
me? Like, why does he keep saying this?
Dean, you will never be Gina Davis. Get that through your thick skull. But so he says that, and Cass is like, I need your help because you were the only one I can go to. You were the only one who will help me. And plus, you're the vessel of Michael. No angel would bring physical harm to you. But which is crazy because Zachariah did really hurt Dean right shortly before this, but that's not the point. Because he's basically, I guess the point is that he's like, they won't kill you. So Dean is like, okay, you know what? Fine. Okay.
No,
like,
Dean does say where he's like, wait, you want to use me as a meat shield? Hold on.
Yeah. So he's like, girl, but then Cass says the thing about being like, please. And he's like, okay, you know what? Fine. I will do this. Do you know where he is? And he's like, yeah. He's like I think he was like, he's in Maine and they're in Pennsylvania. So he's like, oh yeah, let's go. And he goes to put his hand on Dean to like teleport them. And he goes, no. Last time you zapped me someplace, I didn't poop for a week. We are driving there.
It's legitimately so...
This whole scene is so... They're so married. It's insane.
No, they're so married, and in the next episode, they're so divorced. But like... No, but the other piece of this that I find crazy and insane and bonkers, and this is a theme you have to keep in mind for the next 2 episodes, is the whole time we've known Dean, he is not the believer in God. He is not the one who has faith. And now we have a reversal where Destiel is trying to find God, both literally and figuratively. And it is Dean he comes to find faith and the divine. Are you kidding me? To find God?
Fuck off.
Like, to find God and to find faith again, he has to go to Dean. And he's like, and you're the only person I know and I trust. Well, because he rebelled for him, whatever. But you're like, this is this is crazy. Also, they're looking at each other's lips the whole time in this goddamn conversation.
It's so fucking crazy. I just...
Why?
It is literally one of those things where I'm like, I don't know what else I'm supposed to be taking from this scene.
I don't. It's so dark.
So, we cut. We are at the bar that Sam is a busboy at. Because it said on the fucking door when he got hired, busboy wanted.
Okay, fine. He's also wearing this fuck-ass V-neck shirt.
He is wearing a V-neck and an apron. And he's, like, cleaning, doing all his little stuff. And there's, like, a waitress. And
I think she's the bartender.
She might be a bartender, but she's also, like, a waitress. Because it's, like, a bar, like a sports, not like a sports bar, but, like, a bar restaurant kind of deal. Yeah. But she works at the bar, right? And we can't keep having discourse about who the bartender is. I don't think it matters, but it's making me so angry. I don't know why. No, I'm becoming like a bad person because of it. Anyway, so they're at the bar and there's this waitress, Lindsay. She's like pretty blonde, really seems nice, but she's super like up in Sam's business. Not physically, but like is always asking him stuff. And she's like, so Keith, because Keith is the fake name he's chosen. So she's like, so Keith, you know, I saw that you'd like completed the crossword puzzle, like the whatever, like had completed some, I want to say it was like the New York Times crossword, which I guess
New York Times Saturday crossword,
which I guess is really hard. But she was like, you know, you completed that and like you've done all this stuff I've seen you reading. So like you're clearly educated. Like it's weird that you just like show up out of nowhere and decide to work at a bar as a busboy. And he's like, well, you know, just needed to change pace. And keeps
it's 2009 and it's a recession and everybody's just trying to get a job. Like, girl, please.
But so he keeps kind of like deflecting. And she's like, okay, listen, here's the deal. I'm going to beat you at a game of darts. And then you're going to take me to dinner and we are going to talk about your tragic backstory, whatever it is. And he's like, you know what? Fair enough. That sounds good. He grabs the darts and basically throws 3 bullseyes in a row. And she's like, oh, okay. That is not mysterious at all. Like, great. Now I'm just more curious. It's so funny. And then she's like, okay, well, maybe I can have a rematch. Like she's trying to talk to him. And we hear the TV playing and there's a news report and the reporter is saying like, you know, in a nearby town, there was a huge hailstorm and then led to lightning. And then the whole forest and town is on fire. And now we see the fucking bartender. So he's an older guy. So fuck you for saying.
You're right.
I know I'm right. I've never been wrong. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for getting so aggressive with you.
BartenderGate.
BartenderGate has been resolved. So the bartender is like, he looks up and he turns the TV off and he's like, damn, is it just me or does it seem like it's the end of the world?
And it's literally like Sam is like 2 seconds away from looking at the camera like The Office.
No, literally. So, but he and like Lindsay, this girl, and the bartender all kind of like looking back and forth at each other, just being like, yeah, shit's fucked, isn't it? We then cut. Dean and Cass pull up to this police station in Maine that they know has information on Raphael. And they get out of the car. Dean's wearing a suit. And he's like, okay, so what's our plan? Like, how are we going to approach this guy? And Cass is like, well, we go in and tell him that there are demons trying to do bad things and that Lucifer is here and that we need to find the vessel of Raphael and ask if he has information. And Dean's like, okay, so there's a lot of reasons why that is not going to work. We're going to be going undercover. And Cass is like, well, first of all, I have not ever gone undercover. He's like, I don't have any experience with that. And Dean's like, that's okay. But Cass is like, I don't understand why we wouldn't just tell the truth. And Dean's like, well, when humans want something really, really bad, we lie. And he comes over and he grabs Cass's like tie and starts doing it as he's telling him this. And he's like, Cass is like, well, why? Why do you lie? And Dean's like, well, that's how you... And Dean's like, because that's how you become the president. And I was like, okay, some hard-hitting political commentary from Dean Winchester.
They kind of ate that in 2009, I fear.
But, so they're like, oh my gosh. It is so crazy because Dean is telling him, like, we have to lie and you need to pretend to be undercover. as he's doing his tie, I'm like,
he's touching him.
Shit.
He's like fixing him up. You're like, oh wow.
Like, he's like adjusting his collar. I'm
They're
like,
so married. And also earlier he sasses him when he's like, okay, so this guy might be the vessel for Raphael, whatever. Like he says that he heard something, whatever. And Dean just looks at Cass and is like, and he still has his eyes. He saw Raphael and he still has his eyes. Clearly a reference to when Castiel blew out the psychic's eyes.
Dude.
They literally just bicker like a married couple. It's so, and Castiel is just like, okay.
Like, but they're also like, they're not even bickering. It's more like they're quipping. Like they're just having like rapport.
Yeah.
Like it's not like they're nitpicking each other. It's that Dean's like, that's crazy that you did that. And Cass is like, yeah. And then Dean's like, haha, you're so silly.
Like that's the other crazy part. It's not just the like wildly romantic stuff. It's that they have an instant rapport with each other that's like insane. Like,
So they pull up to this station. This is another iconic Destiel moment. They go in and they approach a deputy. And Dean is like, hi, like, we're here from the FBI. He holds up his badge and he's like, and this is my partner. He's also FBI. He is also FBI. And then Cass is like, oh, right. And reaches into his coat and pulls out his badge, and he's holding it upside down, and Dean reaches over, grabs it, and flips it over and puts it back in his hand, and he's like, he's new.
An iconic scene that you have definitely seen in a Super Hulock Tumblr GIF set.
Yeah. Which is also crazy, because I'm like, he had Cass's picture. When did Dean have time to make that ID if they were driving all night? I love that.
Much to unpack.
So they go, they talk to this this deputy, and he is like, they're like, can we ask you some questions? So he's like, yeah, sure, come on back. Just so you know, like, make sure talk into this ear, because the other one's completely blown, you know, because of the gas station explosion. Like, I assume that's what you guys are here for, right? And they're like, yeah. So Dean's like, can you tell us like what happened with that? And the guy is like, yeah, so I mean, I got a call about a disturbance at this gas station nearby, and I wouldn't have believed it if I didn't see it myself. But I show up, and it's like a bunch of guys, like, basically brawling, like, to the death. And Dean's like, how many? And he's like, oh, maybe 30 or 40. Like, I've never seen anything like it. And Dean's like, oh, okay, well, like, do you know what set them off? And Cass is like, well, it was probably demons. And Dean's like, demons get, you know, like, people's demons, like alcohol and drugs, you know, everybody's got their demons, right? And the deputy is looking at them like, bitch, what the fuck?
I will say, Misha is eating it up in this scene of just completely deadpan, and it is quite funny.
Yeah. So Dean's like, oh, that's so crazy, haha. Anyway, so then what happened? And the cop is like, yeah, then, like, there was this explosion, the whole station completely leveled, and they said it was like an underground gas tank, but I don't know, it didn't look like that, like a fireball that you'd usually see. It looked different. It was, and Cass is like, it was pure white, right? And the cop is like, yeah, it was. And there was this one guy, he was just kneeling there. It's his name's Donnie Finnerman. He he was the only survivor. And Dean is like, oh, and let me guess, he just disappeared into thin air. And the cop is like, no, he's in the hospital. Something was seriously wrong with him. He's at a hospital called St. Pete's. And they're like, Cass and Dean kind of look at each other to be like, all right, so that's the vessel. That's where we gotta go.
And Cass looks at Dean and goes, St. Pete's? Like he's trying to, like, play into it now. And Dean's like, uh-huh. Like, oh God, they're so...
Yeah. Dean's like, okay, great job, sweetie pie. You got it. Good job. Then we cut. Sam is back at his motel room, and he is, like, looking up signs of demonic and apocalyptic omens on his computer. And we see him open up his phone and scroll through his contacts, and he
BlackBerry era. Sam is now in his BlackBerry era.
Mm-hmm. He goes to Dean's phone number, and then he kind of shakes his head, and he scrolls back up to Bobby. And he calls Bobby and is like, hey, Bobby, how are you? And Bobby's like, well, I'm not running any marathons because, again, Bobby was stabbed by himself when he was possessed by a demon and now is confined to a wheelchair. And Sam's like, oh, how you doing? Bobby's like, oh, well, good as can be. And he's like, hey, I'm in Oklahoma right now, and I've seen, like, on the news there were these omens that are definitely from Revelations, and he reads off a section of Revelations that talks about hail and fire mixed with blood, and he's like, well, we've had the hail and fire, and I imagine the blood will be coming soon. And Bobby's like, okay, so why are you calling? And Sam's like, well, I figured you might want to get a guy on that, see if there's anybody nearby who can go. And Bobby's like, well, let me think. Who is the best hunter in that vicinity? Oh, it's you. And Sam's like, Bobby, I can't. I can't do that. And he's like, well, Sam, hang on. And he's like, I can't do that. Bye. And he hangs up on Bobby.
And Bobby also says like a pretty bitchy thing also when Sam's like, oh, like, did Dean tell you whatever? And Bobby's like, yeah, he did tell me. And then he does clearly seem like he's sorry for being like that. But I'm also like, Sam, Bobby is the closest thing you have to a father left alive, and you're just letting him be alone after he's recovering from being stabbed and is paralyzed now. If you're just not going to live the life anymore, you could go take care of Bobby. Bitch.
Yeah. It's also, I'm like, you could totally do that. The other thing, too, I like is that Bobby is like, and you know what? Bobby is, I think, very interesting because he sort of paints himself as this realist, as being like, okay, well, fuck that. We have, like, I'm sorry that you're having an issue, but we actually do need to stop the apocalypse. So, like, if you could get on that, that'd be great. But it's also really is a guise because, like, we do find out later, like, he does have there are other hunters in that area. He's just, like, trying to get Sam back into the mix because he's like, girl, this is not good for you. I love Bobby. He's low-key so manipulative, but, like, in a straightforward way. So you're not sitting here being like, oh, well, Bobby's, like, some secret snake. It's like, no, he's just like, you need to do this.
Bobby slays.
After Dean and Cass talked to the deputy, they went to St. Peter's Hospital, and they are looking into Donnie's room, who is, again, the guy who was allegedly who they think is the vessel of Raphael. And he's sitting there, and I guess they'd either talk to the staff or whatever, but he's basically, like, brain dead. And he's just sitting, like, staring out a window in a wheelchair. And Dean's like, well, he looks great. Is this what's going to happen to me when Michael possesses me? And Cass is like, oh no, Michael's much more powerful, so it'll be far worse.
I was like, damn.
Then we get that scene with Sam calling Bobby. Then we cut. Dean is chilling. He's kind of like walking around tidying up in this house that's been clearly abandoned. So you can assume like he's kind of making this home base right now while they're in town. And Cass just appears. And Dean's like, oh, so where have you been? And
like,
Cass
and it's very like married couple. Like, where have you been? Like, I don't know the way he says it. I don't know.
Yeah, he's like, so like, where have you been? Where'd you go overnight? Were you staying with some other woman? No. But Cass is very deadpan. He's like, oh, Jerusalem. And he has this like container, this very old, like, what would you call it? Like a carafe, kind of.
It's like a jug, like a pitcher. Like a pitcher. He's this old ass, ancient looking pitcher.
Yeah, and he's like, this has
also, Destiel, you were in Jerusalem. Free Palestine. Can you take a stop and free Palestine? I know we're focused on the apocalypse, but can we free Palestine? Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So Cass has this, and he's like, this is a very special item. It's very rare. It's holy oil, which we can use to trap Raphael. And Dean's like, okay, so we're really doing this. Are we gonna like survive? And Cass is like, you will. And Dean's like, so you don't think you're gonna make it out of this? And he's like, I don't, it basically is like, I don't plan on surviving after this encounter. And Dean's like, wow, so last night on Earth, what are your plans? And Cass says, I thought I'd just sit here quietly. And Dean says, come on, booze, women, you have been with a woman before, right? And Cass is like, clearly uncomfortable, and he goes,
is a woman or an angel?
What?
He says you haven't been like with a woman or an angel.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, he says either one.
Sure. Or they. But here's the thing. I think that Dean assuming Cass is straight is also so important.
Yeah.
Because he's like, it does not exist in his mind the idea that a man could be attracted to another man. But he's like, you've been with a woman before, and Cass goes, I've never had occasion. And Dean stands up, grabs his jacket, and he says, there are two things I know for certain. Bert and Ernie are gay, and you are not gonna die a virgin. And I know for a split second, Cass had to think, like, are we gonna have sex?
No, literally, like,
and then, because why do you bring up the fact that Bert and Ernie are gay right before you're like, you're not gonna die? Like, what does that have to do with anything?
No, yeah, if we're talking about fucking bitches, like, why are we talking about Bert and Ernie? Like, why did you phrase it like that?
He just wanted to casually bring up some gay people to be like, it's okay, I'm woke.
It's like,
anyway,
it's like Toto to Megami being like, it's okay, it's a man. It's so genuinely
so random.
It's been a while since I've seen this scene, and then I saw it again. I was like, oh, it's gayer than I remember. Like, what do you mean? His first thing is like, oh, of course Dean is into like fucking or whatever, but he's like, oh, so you've never fucked, whatever, and then he's like, I'm thinking about gay people. So anyway, women, and you're like, what's going on in that brain of yours? It's like the gay is trying to like push its way out of your subconscious. It's like beating down the door, but it's not working.
It's literally that like iconic piece of art where it's Cass being like, I love you, Dean, and he's rainbow, and then it's Dean not responding, but like his spirit, which is colored bisexually, is getting pulled away, and he's like, no, I love you too, but he can't say it because they won't let him. That's literally what's happening. It's like he's fighting, he's trying to code, he's like, please just get what I'm saying, help me.
It's legitimately
the spirit of Dean Winchester is trying to fight through Jensen Ackles. He's like, please let me say something gay.
But the problem is that Jensen Ackles says it in a gay way.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you, he's possessed for a moment.
Like, it's genuinely insane.
We cut back to Sam. He's in the bar. He's doing his job. Lindsay's there. They're all just kind of hanging out. And a guy walks in who's wearing like a jacket and a plaid shirt. As longtime Supernatural watchers will know, it's the Hunter uniform. So this guy walks up and he's like, oh, like, hey, Sam. And Sam turns around and realizes there's these three guys here. And they're all clearly dressed as hunters. And they're like, so Sam, how you doing? And Lindsay's like, Sam, I thought your name was Keith. And he's like, oh, Sam's my middle name. And she's like, Keith Sam is your name? And the main guy who had started the conversation, the other hunter, is like, oh, well, Samuels is his middle name, so it's not quite as stupid. So it's clearly trying to, like, cover. And Sam's like, you know what? Yeah. And she's like, oh, well, how do you know him? How do you know Samuel? And they're like, oh, we were hunting buddies. And she's like, oh, you're a hunter, like deer and other stuff? And the guy's like, yeah, some other stuff. And she's like, so what? Definitely have questions about this. And Sam is like, you know what, guys, how about I get you a drink and let's go talk over there away from this conversation. Let's go. So they go to sit at this other table, and Sam brings them all drinks, and they're like sitting there drinking. And they're like, he's like, so how'd you guys like find me? And the main guy is like, oh, well, Bobby called me in, and, you know, we decided to come check it out. And like, seems like there's some big demon situation going on in town, and, you know, we wanted to come see what was going on with you, see if we could get your help. And he's like, you know, I don't think so. I'm kind of out of the game right now. I can't do that. And they're kind of giving him shit about it, being like, oh, like, what happened? What's going on? He's like, it's a long story. I can't be involved. but I hope you guys have, like, good luck. And they're kind of like, well, okay. Sure. Like, they're clearly a little confused he's not willing to tell the story, but seem, like, relatively understanding of being like, okay, well, sucks that he's not in, but let's go do it, boys.
They also say they're like, you know, because he says, is it personal reason? He's like, well, personal reasons. And they're like, what kind of personal reasons would prevent you from helping in the apocalypse? And he's like, I can't get into it, boys. Like,
yeah.
never mind.
So then we get
good God,
another fucking crazy scene.
Insane.
Dean and Cass are basically at a brothel.
Yeah. No, not basically. They are.
They are
like,
at a
are they
brothel.
Like,
no, they're in fucking Maine, I think, still. I'm like, what?
They're in the bar at a brothel in Maine.
And Cass also has made
the setting, like the decorations in this bar are like, it's all like pink. Like,
yeah.
God, I can't.
It's fucking crazy. And Cass is sitting there, and Misha Collins is giving maybe the most uncomfortable performance of all time, and meaning that he is performing physically uncomfortable. Cass is sitting there ramrod straight. He looks fucking terrified. His face is freaking out. He is like, eyes so wide, just looks so scared. And Dean is like, hey, can you calm down? Like, stop being so stressed out. It's all right. And Cass says, this is a den of iniquity. I should not be here. And I'm like, girl, that is an excuse. You are using that as an excuse because I know that you don't actually have an issue with that.
Yeah. Well, and Dean kind of says that. Dean's like, well, you rebelled from heaven, so iniquity is kind of your thing now. So this should be your thing.
Yeah. So they're chilling.
They're sitting at the table together. It's so...
Yeah, they're sitting there, and he's like, hey, just, like, listen, try to have fun. Look, and a woman walks over, and she's wearing, like, a white, like, lingerie set, and Cass looks like he wants to kill himself, and she walks up, and she looks to Cass, and she goes, hi, what's your name? And Dean is, like, giving him this look across the table, like, yeah, man, come on, and he doesn't say anything. He goes, Cass, his name is Cass. What's your name? And she's like, I'm Chastity. And he's like, you're Chastity. She's great. Come on, you should go with her. Have fun. And Cass, like, she kind of pulls Cass up, and as they're going to walk away, Dean is like, here, hang on. Here, take this. He hands him, like, a handful of bills. And he goes, if she asks for a credit card, say no.
And and don't do anything. Just do the standard stuff. Don't pick anything extra off the menu. Castiel looks like terrified. I'm like, Dean Winchester, what are you doing?
Dean is so... Okay, here's my theory. Dean... First of all, the common understanding is that Dean doesn't want Cass to die a virgin, and he's too scared to do it himself. So that's that. But the other thing I think is also funny is Dean being so desperate, because he's like, I'm having these weird attractions towards this man. He has to be straight, right? He has to be into women. Like, he wants women. So he's almost like projecting in the sense that he's like, no. He has to be into women, right? Because I can't think about what that would mean if he's not.
Yeah.
So Cass, like, gets basically dragged off, and then another woman comes over and starts talking to Dean, and, like, they're just having some back and forth. You don't really hear what they're talking about, but it's definitely, like, a couple minutes later, and we hear a woman down, like, the hall start screaming and being like, I'll kill you, screw you. So Dean's like, oh fuck. So he runs back, like, into the rooms, I guess, and Cass is standing there in the hallway, and the woman is yelling at him, and she's like,
Cass is looking kind of disheveled.
Yeah, like, his tie is a little undone, and he's just standing there while she yells at him, and she runs away, and Dean walks up, and he's like, oh my god, like, what happened? What did you do? And Cass is like, well, I don't know. The only thing I did was look her in the eyes and tell her that it wasn't her fault that her father, Gene, ran off. It was because he hated his job at the post office. And Dean's like, this entire industry is practically built, or he goes, this entire industry is built on absent fathers. Oh my god, we gotta get out of here. And I'm like, absent father, Dean, you are one to talk about an absent father, huh?
Well, yeah, and also that obviously that joke does come up later, but like it's literally like, Dean, do you have something to tell us? And then like security comes to like get them out, whatever. But like, it's
This
so
is
insane.
No, every person in this scene has an absent father, Dean and Cass included.
No, literally, and that's what the episode is about.
Yeah. It's also, I mean, listen, we could talk about how this is a negative portrayal of sex work, but you guys know what we think. We don't need to get into it. But
you guys know what we think. Supernatural does not handle any subject well, ever.
Correct. So Dean like drags Cass out, and they are this scene underrated. They walk out of the bar out of like a back exit. Dean is like laughing his ass off, and Cass is like watching him, and as he's seeing Dean like laugh, he also starts smiling, and he's like, what is it? And Dean's like, I have not laughed like that in like a very, very long time, maybe years, honestly. And he has like his arm around Cass, and they're like walking, and they get in the car, and I'm screaming and shitting.
They're like giggling, like it's insane. Like, and if you realize, like, I don't think I have seen him have genuine fun like that in a very long time. You're like, like, when I tell you that these 2 episodes are them falling in love, I do mean that literally.
This is when they realize there's more to their relationship than just lust. Who said that?
Exactly. No, because he was like, what is this feeling so sudden and new about Cass? And then later he's like, wait, do I genuinely like hanging out with him? Wait.
Anyway, so then we cut. Sam and Lindsay are sitting together, because at the end of the last scene, she had been like, okay, I'm tired of this bullshit. We are getting dinner, and you're telling me everything.
She also says, like, oh, none of this kung fu wandering the earth stuff. And I'm like, what are you saying? Stop.
So they are sitting at the bar. They are, like, having, like, a salad. And Lindsay starts being like, so, are you in, like, witness protection or something? Like,
are you in the mafia?
Going on? Like, she's like, you must be in the mafia. And Sam's like, well, no, I don't know. And she's like, who were those guys? Like, were they actually your hunting buddies? Like, what's up? And Sam's like, so I used to be in, have a business that I was in business with my brother, and I made some mistakes, and I hurt people. People got hurt. Yeah. And Lindsay is like, so what was it? And he's like, what was what? And she's like, what was your poison? Basically implying like she knows Sam had some sort of addiction. And she reaches into her pocket and pulls out a coin, and it's like the kind of coin that you get at AA, like a sobriety coin. And she's like, I've been sober for 3 years. And Sam's like, well, you work at a bar. And she's like, well, yeah, and so do you. But, I'm the last person who should be giving anybody advice. But, there's nothing that anyone has ever done that can't be forgiven. You can always change. You can always get better. And Sam is really, like, vibing with this conversation. Like, he's taking this to heart. And, it seems really, really genuine. And he seems really engaged with this conversation and is, like, taking it seriously.
It's actually quite, like, sad and heartfelt. You're like, oh, like,
it's really, I was surprised at how well done this scene was.
Yeah.
I believe then the next scene. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. This is when we cut to the house, right?
No, this is at the hospital.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
Okay. We then cut back to Cass and Dean. They are back at the hospital with the former vessel of Raphael. And Cass is like, okay, so T is, we can do this. And Dean's like, so how are we gonna, like, first of all, Cass is pouring the oil out of the jug that he has around this guy who's just minding his damn business sitting there in a wheelchair.
Yeah, they look at the coast is clear and close the blinds. They're definitely stealing this patient in the hospital. It's dark.
Yeah, but so they pour this, and I also don't entirely understand why they do this, but they pour the oil around this guy, and Cass is like, when the oil burns, no angel can touch or pass through the flames or they die. And Dean's like, okay, great, that's awesome. So, like, how do we get Raphael here? Because clearly he's not in this vessel anymore. And Cass is like, well, there's this connection between an angel and their vessel. It's like a phone line. You just need to know the right number. And he leans in very close to this vessel's ear and starts, like, listing, like, saying, like, an incantation in another language. I assume to be, like, Enochian, which is the language that the angels speak in this show.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that's what it is.
Yeah, but at the end of it, he says in English, he's like, I'm here, you little bastard, or something. And I'm like,
I think he says, like, I'm here, come get me, like, come find me or something.
Yeah, but he calls him a bastard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, so being around Dean has already changed you. He's already changed you. That's so interesting. Anyways.
So Cass backs up and Dean's like, so how long do we have to wait? And Cass is like, well, it really depends, but get ready. And he lights a match and drops it on the oil, and the flame circles the vessel. And then it cuts.
The fire alarm doesn't go off in the hospital.
And I'm also going to be so real. I don't understand why that happened. Because he doesn't appear here. Like, there's no reason for them to use that oil in this situation, especially with what happens in the next scene. So I was really just like, I don't understand why that happened.
Yeah, and that nobody would notice. Like, how did they get out of the anyway?
Yeah, it was this whole sequence doesn't really make sense, but it's still cool. But I was like, wait, what? Anyway, I'm trying to think. There's two scenes that sort of happen simultaneously. So I think what I'm going to do... I'm going to try to remember exactly where they cut, but I'm still going to give you guys all of the information. So if it's a little goofy or if it's not quite in the correct sequence, all of the information's still there, and I'm still going to give you each scene in correct order. So trust that. So we cut. Dean and Cass have gotten back to this, like, abandoned house, and they walk in, and the vessel, Raphael, is standing there, and he has these wings that are made of, like, lightning, and they are flashing throughout this house, and it's a pretty solid visual effect for Supernatural for a CW show in 2009.
Yeah, it kind of eats, like, it's like raining and thundering outside, and then, like, the thunder is, like, synchronized with, like, his wings coming out. It eats.
Yeah. And they start, like, having this sort of confrontation where Raphael is like, so, like, you're gonna be the vessel. Thanks to Destiel for showing me where you were. And Dean's like, oh, okay, awesome. Right, I didn't even think about that. And he's like, well, you need my consent. You can't just, like, do that. You can't just, like, send me to Michael. Like, it doesn't work that way. And Raphael is like, oh, well, do you remember when Zachariah gave you stomach cancer? Because I will tell you, I'm much more creative than him. And he goes to sort of, like, approach Dean and take a swing at him. And Dean's like, well, there's one thing you didn't know. And it's like, we knew you were coming. And he drops his lighter, and, like, where Raphael had come to approach him is where they had a perfect circle of the holy oil, and it catches on fire, and they've trapped him in there. Which is, I'm like, I don't understand why the vessel needed to be circled. Like, at the hospital, that seemed completely unnecessary, but anyway.
I think it was because they expected him to come, like, they were like, if he comes immediately, but he didn't, and they were like, but he will.
Okay.
And then I don't really know how, I guess he tracked Cassie, I don't know. The other thing is that when they do this, Dean and Cass look at each other and like they have this like in sync moment where they like badass like look at Raphael whatever together whatever, and I'm like, oh god, they work together so well. They're so in sync.
In sync.
Oh.
We then cut. We are back at the bar. Sam is cleaning up, and there is a sound of the door opening and like the bell ringing. And he goes, "Oh, sorry, we're closed." And he turns around, and it's the hunter guy, like the first one. And he walks up, and he's like, "So, we went to go stop that demon, and then 10 more jumped out, and they killed one of his friends. I don't remember what the name was, but he's like, yeah, and they killed him, so he's dead." And Sam's like, "Oh, that's terrible. I'm so sorry." And he's like, "Yeah, sorry. Right. Well, they said some really interesting things about you." And Sam's like, "Oh, they're demons. You can't trust what they say." And he's like, right. So cut it out with all the lies, though, because I know something's not adding up. You didn't just leave the business. Like, something happened. So he's basically implying like that the demons told him Sam started the apocalypse. Sam is addicted to demon blood, all that random stuff, all that fun, quirky, random stuff. And Sam's like, "Okay, you're upset. I get that. Let's like calm down, and I will tell you, what's going on, but I just need you to take a minute." And at that moment, one of the other hunter who was with them, because there were 3 of them, comes in, and he has Lindsay, and he's like holding her and has like a knife up to her throat, and she's like, "Oh my god, like what's going on? Huh?" Which is crazy, because I'm like, and Sam is like, "This is not you, this is insane." And he's like, "Well, it's funny what having your best friend killed by demons will do to a guy."
I also just want to say, I want to put in a disclaimer here, but we've had to have this conversation several times on this podcast of how this show treats Black men in particular, whether they are extras or otherwise. There are 2 Black men in this episode. One is the hunter who comes in with the knife to Lindsay's throat. Much to unpack there. And then the other is the vessel for Raphael, which they have various Black actors play vessels for angels a couple different times, and they're always very antagonistic angels, never the ones who are fun and slayful. It's very okay.
Yeah, and it is like important to say, like you'd said, like the one who has Lindsay, who's like holding the knife to her, is a Black man, but the guy who's doing all of the like the guy who's like leading the charge, the main hunter who's talking to Sam, is a white man. So it's not like I wouldn't say that this is like a distracting example of any like weird stereotype, but it is definitely something to be like, huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And also in a show where we have so few like positive Black characters, it's like, come on, man. It's like we have Rufus.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
You know what I will say though, at least Raphael slayed.
Raphael does slay.
Raphael served.
I'm sorry to Destiel, but he kind of serves.
He does. They do eat him up in the end, but he does serve.
Yeah, Uriel does not serve. Raphael does.
Yeah. Uriel honestly served in kind of a funny way at the end, though.
Yeah.
Anyway. So they're like, okay, like, we're gonna kill her unless you tell us what's going on. And I believe at this point we cut back to the room with Dean, Cass, and Raphael. And Raphael is circled by this holy fire. And he's like, "Well, what do you want from me? What is this?" And Cass and Dean are interrogating him, and they're like, "Well, where is God?" And he's like, "Oh, you haven't heard? God is dead." Because you know how bad the 20th century was? And the 21st century is even worse. You think God would allow that to happen?
And I just have to say, I'm like, Raphael, you were there for all the things that happened in antiquity that were pretty bad, that were like even in the Bible. So like, I don't know what you were trying to say with that. But however, I've been living through the 21st century, and you know what? He kind of ate that.
He was kind of right. But Cass is like, "Well, then who brought me back if God's dead? Checkmate." And he's like, "Well, it was probably Lucifer, because he needs more fallen angels to fight for his cause. So that's probably who resurrected you, ding dong." And Cass is like, No, surely not. Surely that's not true.
I don't think Lucifer would have that kind of power either. So I don't know what you're saying, Raphael. Like,
yeah. But Dean also has a point where he's like, oh, you're like, so your daddy, what? He ran away and disappeared. Did he work at the post office?
No, he was waiting to make that joke. He was waiting for it.
And Raphael's like, this shit is stupid. And Dean's like, well, it wasn't. It was Cass's idea. Or he goes, this shit is stupid. And he's like, well, it was Cass's idea. And Cass like looks at him like, bitch, why'd you rat me out like that? That's so embarrassing. But so they're going kind of back and forth. And Raphael is like, like all we want to do is bring about paradise. Like we want to make this paradise. It's terrible right now. So Dean's
he's like the angels. He's like, we're tired. We're exhausted.
Yeah.
We want it over. And I was like, okay, same girl. You know what?
Yeah. So Dean's like, well, like, are you going to trample all these people? Like daddy leaves the house and you think you can just do whatever we want? And he's like, we can get whatever, and what we want, we get, which I'm like, that's crazy. Cause I feel like angels are constantly flopping. So I don't know if that's quite true. So that's the tea. Then, so they have this whole conversation. The house starts like getting completely like fucked, like is totally getting destroyed. Like, cause it's burning. And then like, as they've been having this conversation, this storm has been raging and like the windows are blowing in, and Cass is like, no, like we're going to find God and we're going to fix this. And they go to leave. And Raphael is like, Castiel, I will find you. And Cass is like, maybe, but today you're my little bitch. And he walks out and leaves. And Dean looks at Raphael and he goes, yeah, what he said, and runs out after him. And they leave Raphael standing in the fire.
And I have to say, the look on Dean's face, I'm going to say this right now and here, I think that's the moment that Dean fell in love.
Yeah, I think he wanted him so bad in that moment. Because also like, the next scene that happens with them all like confirms it.
Yeah, but like, I there's so many moments where you're like, oh, like the first time they meet each other, whatever. I'm like, yeah, Castiel is the one who fell first, but Dean in that moment fell so hard. It's crazy.
Hard, but he fell harder.
No, literally though. Like,
so, it's fucking crazy. Because the next scene, oh, you know what? Okay. Oh, I'll get there. Don't worry. So we cut back to the scene with Sam and the other hunters.
Sam's no good, very bad day.
Sam's having a shitty day. But Sam's like, okay, like you can put the knife down. Like, let's just talk. I'll tell you everything. So the other hunter does put the knife down, but he's still holding Lindsay. But he's like, listen, yes, it is my fault. Like, I did start the apocalypse and I did do all of the stuff with demons. Like, that is true. But I'm done with that. I was tricked. I was manipulated. I don't want that. I'm not doing that. And the main guy is like, yeah, well, I also heard that you're addicted to this. And he pulls out a vial that he has. And Sam immediately knows it's demon blood. And he's like, so here's what we're going to do. I'm not going to kill you and we're not going to hurt her. You're going to drink this. And then you're going to go and smite all of the demons that killed our friend. And Sam's like, I'm not going to do that. Are you fucking crazy? Like, what is wrong with you? And they start like attacking him. Like they're fighting him. And Sam's like beating them up. But one of them, the main guy, like goes to pour the demon blood down Sam's mouth. And Sam looks like he drinks it. And they kind of let go for a minute. And then Sam spits it back in his face and beats the fuck out of both of them. And is like, get the fuck out of here.
He kind of ate that, I fear. Like, yeah. He did. Also, there's a moment where he's like, they're like, you need to say what you've done. And he's like, yes, I did it. And they're like, no, say it. Like Twilight style, they're like, say it. And he's like, yeah. And he has to say flat out, he's like, yes, I started the apocalypse. And it does cut to her face where she's like, what? She's so confused. She's like, what the hell? And then this stuff starts. It's being her had to be crazy. Because when they start fighting, they handcuff her to like the bar. And she's just sitting there like, what do you mean the apocalypse? Like, it's gotta be funny being her.
Yeah, and she's thinking about the conversation that they had the other day when the news was on, and they were like, oh yeah, there's like fire and hail and stuff, and the bartender made that comment. She was sitting there thinking, oh my god, it really is that's why he had that reaction to that. Okay. Then she has to go back to her day job the next day and be like, huh, well, I'm forever changed.
No, literally.
So we cut. Oh my god. So
wait.
Something.
Oh, also at the end of this fight when Sam wins, he has the knife like up to one of their throats, and he kind of looks at her and he's like, "Oh, I can't kill this guy, whatever," and like kind of lets him go. And because she's looking at him like, "Girl, like you gonna kill this guy?" It's kind of insane. He just knocks them out like.
He tells them to leave. He like beats the shit out of them and then is like, get out of here.
And they leave and they're like, oh. I also just want to point out that they're kind of stupid. Did they think only one vial of demon blood is going to do it? Like, he had to like drain Ruby and this other person.
To be fair, they don't know. Like, yeah, they probably just heard like, oh, he drank his demon blood and said, okay, that's enough for us.
Yeah. Where do you think they got the vial?
Well, yeah, because it isn't like a funky little special vial. Maybe they just had that.
Yeah.
So then we cut, and I have to amend. There's a scene earlier in the episode where I had said like there was like this montage of Dean hunting while Sam was working as the busboy. Dean in this scene, there's a part where he's driving the Impala and he looks over like to the shotgun seat, and it's clearly he's sad Sam isn't there. So now we have this scene where Dean is driving, and Cass is in the passenger seat, and Cass is looking a little like, a little sad, and Dean's like, hey, like basically like, don't let that get you down. I'm sure he's still out there. Like, I'm sure God's still here. When my dad was missing, there were so many times when all of the signs pointed to him being dead. All logic said that he should be dead. But I knew he was still alive. And I know that's what's happening here. Just, you know what? Ignore Raphael. Don't even worry about him. What do you think? And Cass is like, I think he's still alive. I think God's still alive. And I have to find him. I'm going to keep looking for him. But that's, whatever. Are you okay? How are you? And Dean's like, I got to be honest. I'm actually really good. Like, I shouldn't be. I feel great. But I've had more fun with you in the last 24 hours than I'd had with Sam in years. I feel like I've been chained to my family. And now that I'm alone, I'm happy. And then he looks over and Cass has disappeared, and the smile falls from his face.
Okay, there's several things to unpack. There's several things to unpack. The first one is, again, the thing that I said before, that Dean is not the person. Dean was never the person who believed in God. Dean is not the person who believes in faith. And now he's looking Cass straight in the eye and being like, have faith in God. Literally, like, Castiel's faith and ability to have faith is literally restored by Dean, first of all, which is crazy boots, bonkers, bananas, insane. And then the second thing, he's telling an angel to believe in God. Like, and then I've had more fun with you than in the past 24 hours, and I've been chained to my family, and I'm alone, but I'm with you. And here's the thing. If you have watched the November 5th, 2020 episode, that episode ends with Cass being like, you've changed me, Dean. I love you. I'm the most happy I've ever been. And then disappearing. And what happens in this scene?
No, it's so, because here's the thing that's so sick and twisted that I'm thinking about from Dean's perspective, of him being like, I'm so chained to my family. I'm so used to the person I have to be when I'm around my family. I'm so used to worrying about Sam. is that not like such a gay thing to be like, I'm so stuck with the idea of what I'm supposed to be, the role I fill in my family, and as soon as he gets a time to be like by himself and really like explore who he is and explore like himself separate from his family,
and it's
like,
with a man.
And it's with a man. Like, girl, it's okay. It's also so crazy that he's like, I'm happy. Like, he's telling Cass he's happy. Then as soon as Cass disappears, he looks sad. He wasn't happy because he was alone. He was happy because he was with Cass.
Like, it's so obvious. Like,
no, it's fucking sickening. It's crazy.
It's so crazy. I had to pause it and like walk around the room. I was like,
so sick.
It's literally, I do believe I have been changed for the better. Like, this is the moment they fell in love with each other, and they were like, oh, we have the same daddy issues.
Oh, it's so, it makes me feel fucking insane. Okay, this episode's not over yet. This episode's not over yet.
I do want to point out, we have a whole scene in a brothel where he's like, yeah, I'm sexually attracted to people who have issues because their dad left. And then it's like, Castiel has issues because his dad left.
Okay.
I'm just saying. Anyway, I need to calm down.
I'm gonna be so real. Feels like a reach.
I know. You can cut that out. I'm fujoing out.
Girl, we're fujoshing out right now. Okay. So the episode's not over yet. So Sam is back at the motel room and he's lying in bed. And he looks over and Jessica is there again. And she's like, so is this who you are now? And she kind of like puts her hand up on his chest and he like leans over and has his hand on her. And she's like, you're just gonna, run away? Is this who you are? And he's like, no, you're wrong. People can change. And she's like, no, Sam. And like, she's like, that's not true. And he kind of sits up, faces away from her. And he goes, how can you be so sure? And this scene's fucking crazy. So she sits up and transforms into Mark Pellegrino, who is the actor who plays Lucifer's current vessel, Nick. Which is so sick and twisted, because imagine you're sitting next to your beautiful girlfriend and then you look over and Mark Pellegrino's there.
Like, yeah, I would be terrified. I also want to point out, we cut from Dean with Cass to Sam with his beloved girlfriend. I'm just putting that out there. I'm just saying.
So, okay, anyway. But Sam's like, no, like, how can you be so sure that people can't change? And in Nick's voice, or Lucifer, he says, because you freed me. And Sam turns around and is like, what the fuck, bitch? And he stands up and like, they're still sitting in bed next to each other. Yeah. It's also, Sam jumps out of bed.
It's supposed to be reminiscent of the scene where Lucifer is speaking to Nick using the like image of his dead wife. But it's hilarious.
It's fucking crazy. But he's like, you know who I am. And Sam's like, oh my god, like, you're Lucifer. And he's like, yeah. And I gotta tell you, this vessel, like, was plan B. This vessel, like, keeps trying to self-implode, like implode, and I'm just trying to hold it together because it's not my true vessel. Why do you think you were in that church that day? Why do you think you were there? And Sam's like, what do you mean? And he's like, it's you. You are my true vessel. So why don't you tell me where you are and I can come find you? Because he can, like, appear to Sam in this dream, but he doesn't know, like, physically where he is because he's still an angel. But Sam's like, wait, like, you need my permission? And he's like, yeah, of course, I'm an angel. I'm not just gonna invade your body. And Sam's like, well, I'll kill myself then before I let that happen. And Lucifer's like, well, I would just resurrect you. But listen, I will never lie to you. I will never trick you. But you will see us through. You know, the reason that I fell, that I was cast out of heaven, was because I loved God too much. And they did this to me. My heart breaks for you, Sam. But it always had to be you. you will consent. You are going to go for this. And Sam's like, no, like, that is fucked up. I'm not doing that. I will not do that ever. And then he looks around and notices, like, Lucifer has disappeared. And then the episode ends.
This episode is crazy style. Like, I feel crazy about it. And the next one is also crazy, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Oh, Destiel.
So this is also important because this is the reveal that, like, I know we've talked about it on the show, but, like, this is the reveal that Sam and Dean are the fated vessels of both Michael and Lucifer, and that they are fated to fight. So that's the tea. And I think that this is, like, I think it's well set up, but I also feel like it's kind of like, okay, I feel like we've kind of lost the plot a little here. Like, what the fuck? It feels too big, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh my God.
Speaking of big, speaking of apocalypses, the next episode, season 5, episode 4, is called The End. Lord as my witness. This episode has a lot of good stuff and then a lot of absolutely insane whack shit in it.
This is also an episode written by famous Destiel warrior Ben Edlund, who we talked about in a previous episode. He actually did talk specifically about this episode getting changed, like the script being changed, because it was too overtly Destiel. So just keep that in mind. We'll talk about it when it actually gets to that point. I have a little note about where that takes place, but just keep that in mind.
Destiel warrior Ben Edlund. The episode starts and Dean drives up. He's in Kansas City in front of a hotel. He gets out of his car and there is, like, someone preaching proselytizing about a god. And he goes up to Dean and he's like, do you know what God's plan for you is? And Dean just kind of laughs and is like, well, and I'm like, oh, I know Chuck loved writing that one.
He's like, do you think about what God's plan for you is? And Dean's like, oh, way too much, buddy, and walks away. And the guy's like, what?
He goes in his room we cut to Cass calls him up on the phone. And we have established how this is very funny because Cass can't find him. So he literally has to just call him up on the phone. And Cass is like, okay, we need to get the Colt. And Dean's like, the Colt? Like, the Colt that I was trying to find for years? That Colt? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, why would it...
If you'll recall, the Colt is a gun created by Samuel Colt that can kill anything. And it was, the boys had it in their possession, and then they lost it.
Yeah. And also, I don't know, like, can it kill an angel? Who can say? Supposedly.
It can kill anything, allegedly.
They should have used it to kill God at the end, but they didn't. Or maybe I don't even remember. Dean kind of jokes and he's like, why would they keep the Colt? It's a weapon that can kill demons. Why would they keep that? And, like, Castiel's like, well, that's exactly the reason why, because it's the only thing that can kill Lucifer, so they want to keep it out of anyone else's hands. And we see that Castiel is talking to Dean. Dean is in this motel, but Cass is by the side of the road in this very iconic shot, just, like, standing there, like the standing guy emoji on his phone, looking kind of lost and confused. And Cass is like, okay, where are you right now? And Dean's like, here I am, I'm in this room, whatever. And he's like, okay, I'll be there right there. And Dean's like, can you, like, give me a second? Like, give me, like, 4 hours. I've been driving for a long time. I need to do stuff. And Cass is like, what stuff do you need to do? And he's like, well, I need to eat. I need to sleep. I'm exhausted. And he's like, I need to rest. Like, come here in the morning. And this is another iconic Cass line where he's like, okay. Cass is like, okay, I'll wait. And then he just stands there.
Dean, like, hangs up the phone and he's like, I guess I'll just Wait right here. There's also another scene that's so iconic, or another line that's so iconic, is that in the beginning of this conversation, he's like, "Where are you?" And Dean's like, "Hang on, man, I'm doing this." And he's like, "Dean, you have to tell me. The voice is telling me that I'm almost out of minutes."
Oh,
yeah. If you recall, if you're too young to remember, you used to have to buy minutes for your phone, like for your phone plan, for your mobile phone, and you only had a certain amount of minutes that were covered by your plan to talk on the phone.
Yeah, and he clearly probably had like a prepaid phone, so it's so, these little moments where Cass starts to get humanized are like iconic moments in cinema, truly. And then him just being like, "Okay, I'll wait here then," and you're like, "Ugh." We cut to Dean is sleeping now, and his phone, it starts ringing, and he picks it up, and he thinks it's Cass, and he's like, "Cass, can you please let me sleep? Like, girl, please." And instead, it's Sam, and he's like, "Dean," he's like panicking, and he's like, "Listen, Lucifer found me, or at least came to me in my brain, and said that I'm supposed to be his vessel." And Dean is like not shocked. And Sam's like, "Why are you not shocked?" And he's like, "Honestly, not the weirdest thing I've heard." Because as you remember, he found out that he is supposed to be the vessel for Michael. So he's like, "Sure, Jan. Okay." And he just kind of like gets up and sits on the sofa and is like, "Oh my God." And Sam's like, "Okay, I want back in. I want to resume hunting. We're going to hunt Lucifer and we're going to kill him." And Dean's like, "What is this? Oh, are we back to revenge? Like, how do you think that you could whatever?" And he's like, "No, like this is," and Sam is like, "No, this is redemption." And Dean just kind of sadly is like, "Actually, we're better hunters separately than we are as a team, because we are each other's weakness." And he sort of looks really sad about it. And he's like, he calls them the fire and the oil of Armageddon. And he's like, "We have to make sure that this doesn't happen. We need to just pick different hemispheres to live in. And they're always going to use the fact that we love each other against each other. We're not stronger when we're together. I think we're weaker. Whatever it is between us, love, family, like that's what they use." And I'm like, why did they phrase it like that? I'm like,
what do you mean? They have love and family. Why are you so Wincest pilled that you can't accept that?
I don't know. Sorry, it's just
there's nothing wrong with that. You're just being drama queen.
Yeah, you're right. I just was like, ugh. Anyway, I'm like, whatever it is between us, that you love each other, that you're brothers, like, why did you phrase it like that? Anyway, you can cut that out. You're like, "No, I'm keeping it in so that people know that you're a Wincesty."
No, I'm taking it out because it diminishes the impact of this very sweet moment.
Sam is really upset at this, and he's like, "Please, Dean, we can do it." And Dean's like, "No, goodbye, Sam." And he hangs up on him, and you can see like he's crying. He's like almost in tears at this point. And it's really awful. And he hangs out with him, and he hangs up on him, sorry. And then we cut to Dean waking up. But he's waking up not in the motel room he was just in. He wakes up in this like trashed, abandoned, burnt out looking hotel room on this like stripped mattress. And he's like, "What the fuck?" And he's super confused. He looks out this window. It's broken. And he sees that he is now in Kansas City. And it's been like, it looks like the apocalypse has occurred. Broken shit everywhere. It's like dire. And he's like, "What the fuck has happened?" And there's no people around. He leaves the hotel. He starts exploring. There's burnt out cars everywhere. It's it's giving The Last of Us. Like and he encounters this little girl in an alley, and he keeps going up to her, and he keeps going, "Little girl, little girl." And I'm like, who says that? But okay. he goes up to her, and then suddenly he sees blood like dripping out of her mouth, whatever, and then she's like kneeling on some glass, and then she like whips up and uses one of the glass shards to try and stab him, and he like is like, oh shit, and he almost punches her, which is, I think, is funny. And he knocks her unconscious, and then he turns around and he sees the word Croatoan spray painted on the brick wall behind him. Oh, God.
We've talked about this before because there's an episode where they're like, oh, the Croatoan virus is making all these people go crazy and violent, just like what happened to the Lost Colony. And it's like, well, no, that's not actually, none of that's true. If you've listened to our backlog, you know. If you literally Google, like, what actually happened.
They just left.
Do you want to explain a little? You want to give
I can't remember that episode that well, but basically this is hearkening back to, they did a whole episode about the virus that created the lost colony of Roanoke. And they're like, oh, it's back and it's making people crazy, and it's the Croatoan virus. And we talked in that episode about how this show is very anti-Indigenous. We know now that the lost colony of Roanoke is literally just like they left, and they like basically left a note, and people were like, what does it mean? And I'm like, it meant that they left. Yeah. They went to go live with the native population, and that's why there's a native population of people who weirdly have blue eyes.
Yeah. And it's also like Croatoan was the name, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was like the name of an area near there. So it was more of a here's where we went, as opposed to a like Croatoan is the name of this crazy satanic thing, blah blah blah. Like, it's very anti-Indigenous. We've already talked about it a little like on this show, so I guess we don't need to go too in depth. But keep in mind that was a stupid plot device when it happened, and it's stupid now.
Yeah, it's real dumb, but strap in. Croatoan virus is back on the fucking show. God. He sees this and he's like, oh shit. And then suddenly a literal small army of people starts coming around the corner, and they are clearly infected, and they start running at him, and they start chasing him through the city. And he runs into like a dead end next to some like chain link fence. And he's like, oh my God, they're going to kill me. And suddenly, like, the army in tanks shows up and starts killing all these people, barely missing him. And he like runs into an alley. And it's very like, look, the military saved us. And you're like, okay. And this is where I have to say,
it's also, sorry, I have to interrupt. It's also playing Do You Love Me by the Contours really loud. Like, they're playing, the army's playing it over their speakers, and it is funny as fuck. I'm like, okay, this is so bleak.
Yeah, I have to put in here, I'm like, you know, damn, I wish the government took a pandemic this seriously in real life. But then again, one where they have a reason to shoot people would probably be one they actually gave a fuck about. So we cut to night falling. Dean has come out of his hiding place in this alley. He worms his way behind this fence that says like Croatoan virus hot zone. And he looks at it, and it says it's dated August 1st, 2014.
In the distant future year of 2014.
Yeah. Well, it's not distant future. It's 5 years.
I know.
He is from 2009, but we're like, the future, 2014. The pandemic year, 2014. And watching this now is like, oh. It's so dark. He's so confused. He's like, what the fuck? He hotwires a car, and he speeds off. He's trying to turn on the radio. He's trying to call people. Nothing's on. He's like, yeah, that sounds about right. And lo and behold, guess who appears in his passenger seat? Zachariah. This will be, time number 2 where a angel shows up and is like, hey, Dean, time for some time travel. God. And Dean just goes, I thought I smelled your stink on this Back to the Future crap. Which I'm like, to be fair, he didn't put him in the past before. That was Cass. Zachariah put him in this, weird scenario without his memory before, but that was in the present.
Yeah, but it does seem kind of to be his vibe,
Yeah.
He also says some stuff that's so funny in this conversation. So, there's one thing that I specifically remember that I will have to speak on.
So Zachariah is like, Zachariah pulls out a newspaper and he's like, oh, Croatoan pandemic reaches Australia. President Palin defends the bombing of Houston. You
Which
really
is
thought
okay.
They ate with that in 2009?
I need to take a moment. So Sarah Palin, who ran as John McCain's vice presidential nominee in 2008, lost to Barack Obama and Joe Biden. So, okay, Dean is from 2009. So, like, are we saying that in the Supernatural universe, John McCain won that election?
Because Dean didn't say yes to Michael. John McCain won the election.
But see, that was my first thought. But again, Dean is in 2009. The Angels didn't tell him what the deal was until 2009, so the election had already happened in 2008.
They had the January 6th insurrection, and they made Palin the president.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Is like, so are we saying that that's like the... No, it does. I'm saying, are we saying the deviation of the Supernatural universe and our universe is that Barack Obama never became president? Because that cannot be.
Yeah.
Unless there was a coup. I do agree. I like the idea that there was like a coup in like 2010 in this future timeline.
Yeah.
John McCain and Sarah Palin were installed, and then John McCain fucking died, so now Sarah Palin's the president. That's the only way I can see it.
Yeah, it's so, and also the next thing he says is insane. He's like, oh yeah, no more sports because what's left of Congress has revoked the right of public assembly. And I just started like sadly chuckling at that because I was like, well, they did that now in response to protests, so this isn't funny anymore. This is okay. And Dean's like, girl, how did you find me? I have an Enochian sigil on my ribcage. And Zachariah's like, okay, so we had to use some like kind of unorthodox methods, and we'd use some human informants, and we had to go to some the fringier Christian groups, and maybe do some inspirational visits. And basically, he's saying that they turned all these, like, they basically appeared to, he's like, well, we gave your description to all these fringe Christian groups so that if they saw you, they would tell us. So basically he turned like the Westboro Baptist Church and Jehovah's Witnesses into informants. And so when that preacher saw him, that was how they found him. Which I think is actually really funny. Dean's like, send me back to 2009. Why am I here? And Zachariah's like, you're going to be here for 3 days so you can see what happens if you continue to refuse to be Michael's vessel. And Dean's like, what? So it is now confirmed that this is the future. This isn't some like alternate thing. This is the future. So Dean does what any self-respecting person would do, and he goes to Bobby's house. And he arrives there, and it's in shambles. The door is open. He's like, Bobby, like, where are you? And he sees that Bobby's wheelchair is tipped over, and there's a bloody bullet hole in it. And I'm like, it looks like nobody's been here for a while, but that blood was still wet. So what's going on? And he goes to the secret hiding place in Bobby's like mantle, and he finds Bobby's hunting journal. And he finds this like black and white, don't know why it's black and white, picture of several men holding shotguns in front of a sign that says Camp Chautauqua. And Bobby and Cass are among them. And Cass looks very gruff, like he's grown a beard, he's in like hunter clothes, he's holding a machine gun. And so he's like, shit, I gotta go there. And so he goes to this camp, And he like sneaks past the guards at the gate, and he sees his car is junked and fucked up in like the vehicles on the other side of the fence. And he's like, oh my God, like what did they do to you, baby? Like, oh my God. And he starts to inspect it, whatever. And suddenly somebody comes up from behind him and knocks him unconscious. And the camera pans up, and who is it? It's Dean. It's himself from the future, clearly.
But a good way we can tell the difference, our Dean's jacket's blue. This Dean's jacket is green.
Or black-ish.
No, it's green. It's like army color almost.
Yeah. Oh my God. So now we have Jensen Ackles' orphan black moment. So Dean wakes up. He is handcuffed to this like bunk bed ladder in some sort of fucking cabin. And future Dean is looking at him and is like, and Dean's like, what the hell? And future Dean is also very confused. And there's a couple of things that happen in this scene that are a little wild and crazy. So Dean is like, I'm not a demon. I'm not a shapeshifter. I'm not a whatever. And future Dean's like, yeah, we already checked you for all those things. But like, what are you? Because I saw that you have every single tool and thing that I carry on me. So how do I know that you're me? And Dean's like, it's Zachariah. And future Dean is like, Zachariah, where is that bitch? And Dean's like, I don't know. Like, and he's like, oh, of course you don't know. And he's like, all right, tell me something that only we would know. And this is,
I've got to say, you know what? I love this.
I love it.
I think this is amazing. And you know what? I think many others may disagree, may say it's weird or that there's an issue, but I love this.
Yeah. So Dean says, when we were 19, Rhonda Hurley made us try on her pink satiny panties. And you know what? I kind of liked it. And future Dean is just like, huh, touche. Okay, so I know that's me. And you're like, hello?
Also, the fact that has stuck with him for this long. Wow. That's fucking crazy. The fact that
Dean.
I am obsessed. Ben Edlund, your mind is fucking insane.
Why did they put that, like, like, and that's not even the craziest thing in this episode.
No, I you know what? It's because he needs a little. I love that UK headcanon Dean Winchester is a little transgender in any direction you want, and there's canonical support for it.
Okay, so they start talking, and future Dean's like, okay, listen, so the demon's endgame, because the apocalypse has come, is to finish us off with the virus. And it's very effective, it's very dangerous, it's very scary. And they're talking about it, and Dean's like, well, where's Sam? And Dean's like, well, there was this heavyweight showdown in Detroit. And
I think we need to make the distinction of making sure we say like future Dean versus regular Dean. So that we can make sure.
Yeah. So future Dean says there was this heavyweight showdown in Detroit and Sam didn't make it. Past Dean says he looks really sad, and he's like, well, why weren't we with him? And future Dean is like, well, we hadn't talked for at least 5 years. And past Dean realizes the last time he just spoke to Sam on the phone had to be that last time they spoke. And he's like, oh my God. And he's like, did we ever try to find him? And future Dean is like, well, we have other people to worry about. And he clearly does not want to talk about it. And you're like, what the fuck? And he's like, future Dean's like, okay, I have a mission to do, so I gotta leave you. And he leaves him like shackled to the floor. And past Dean is like, you can't just like leave me here. And future Dean is like, yes, I can. And past Dean is like, oh, so you don't trust yourself? And Future Dean is like, of course not. And you're like, oh God. Oh God. Yeah, much to unpack there. We cut to our Dean, 2009 Dean, has managed to basically, he's been clawing like a nail out of the wood flooring to free himself from the cuffs. And he sneaks out into the compound. And lo and behold, who comes up to him but Chuck? And Chuck is asking him, he's like, we're running out of these supplies and this and that and the whatever. And Dean's like, I don't know. Maybe we share. And Chuck is like, huh? And Chuck is like, oh, aren't you supposed to be on a mission right now? And Dean's like, oh, yeah, I was just like on my way. And then he turns to go. And this woman comes up to him and tries to punch him and kick him and beat his ass. And he's like, what the hell? And he jumps behind Chuck. And this woman, her name is Risa, is angry. And she's like, oh, so you were in this other woman's cabin last night? And he's like, oh. And Dean's like, shit, like I'm getting punished for things that like I haven't even done yet. Like shit. And immediately, and I mean immediately after that, he goes, so is Cass here?
And Chuck's response to this is so funny. He's like, yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere.
He doesn't ask, is Bobby here? Because like Bobby could be still alive. I don't know. He goes, is Cass here? And we cut to oh God. Oh Lord.
So challenging, so dark.
This is so okay. So we cut to Dean is walking through the door to another cabin, and the door has like like it's like one of those like beaded door covers. And Castiel is sitting, and the wiki says in a half lotus, sitting in a circle of women, looking kind of disheveled, talking about Zen and shit like that. And then these women are looking at him enraptured, and he looks fucking blissed out. And you're like, what the fuck? He has his cultural appropriation era.
His hair's messy. He has a little bit of scruff. He's wearing completely different clothes, like a loose button up and like some... It's just,
It's so dark. And he sees Dean, and he's like, oh, like, I need to confer with our fearless leader. And he says kind of like as a joke. And he's like, oh, go get washed up for the orgy. And they all leave. And now Dean, our Dean, who's the one who walked in, is like, what are you, a hippie? And Cass is like, oh, I thought you'd gotten over trying to label me.
He's fucking dudes.
Oh, absolutely.
This was White Woman Wednesday, and he's like, okay, all the other days it's men.
Yeah.
Our present Dean just didn't get to see it.
Yeah. And I was like, huh? And then Cass turns around and he's like, wait a minute. There's something off about you. And he's like, oh, you're not from this time. And Dean's like, oh, finally, like you get it because you're an angel. And he's like, who did this to you? And Dean's like, it was Zachariah. And Cass is like, yeah, that makes sense. He says only Zachariah could have done something. I'm like, but you did this, Cass. You also did this.
So maybe it's different going from the past to the future.
I don't know.
Maybe the future's harder or something.
I don't know. And Dean's like, okay, like, put on your angel wings and juice me back to the past. And Cass just starts giggling. And Dean's like, are you stoned? And Cass is like, generally, yeah. So this whole episode, the assumption is that Cass is high as hell.
Oh my god.
It's so insane. We cut to outside. Future Dean is returning to camp in his Jeep. And they all get out of their Jeep. They're cracking some beers. And our Dean walks out of Cass's cabin to go up to them. Don't know why. And suddenly, Future Dean takes out his gun and shoots the guy who just got out of the truck with him. He shoots him in the head immediately. And our Dean is like, what the fuck? And everyone else is not looking at the guy who was shot, but is looking at the other Dean going, what the hell? And Future Dean just goes, he's like, okay, the situation was obviously messed up. And he and we got a pretty messed up situation going. If there's something you need to know, I'll let you know. Leave this to me. And you're like, that's insane. So Future Dean takes our Dean back into his cabin. And he's like, what were you thinking? He's like, there's a bunch of twitchy survivors. And he's like, which one? And our Dean is like, well, which one's going to be worse? Like seeing their leader kill somebody in cold blood? And then our Future Dean is like, oh, well, or what about watching someone talk with their clone? I think that would be wilder. And he's like, because we see people get killed because they got the virus all the time. This is definitely weirder. And our Dean is like, how did you recognize it? And Future Dean is like, well, I've been around the block. It's been 5 years. I recognize the signs of infection, and it had just started, and he was about to turn, and he was like, I didn't want to have to give a good man bad news, so I just turned around and shot him. And our Dean is like, what the fuck? And our Dean is like, okay, I guess that makes sense. And then they start having a drink together. And our Dean asks, like, how did the mission go? And Future Dean reveals that they got the cult. And now Dean is like, I thought that it was lost. And Future Dean is like, well, the demons have been moving it around, and I've been looking for it for 5 years. And he's like, I finally found it. And tonight, I'm going to kill the devil. Future Dean has a meeting with that woman, Risa, and Cass. And now his past self is sitting there. And Risa is looking and is like, what the fuck? And she's also pissed. And before they get into talking about it, our Dean is like, our Dean is like, oh, because Risa's kind of mad, and Future Dean is like, what is her issue? And our Dean is like, oh, well, you were in another woman's tent. Whatever. He's like, basically, he's ratting on himself in the future, which I think is hilarious. Then they get into the conversation, and Risa is like, how do we know that can actually kill the devil? We don't actually know that. And like, and she's like, and how are we gonna find Lucifer? And Future Dean is like, we found a demon and we tortured him, and he gave us our location. And she's like, come on, like they could have lied. And he's like, I would know. I'm pretty good at this. And Cass is like, yeah, he's pretty well schooled in the art of getting the truth. This point on, the interactions, especially between both versions of Dean and Castiel, they are giving the most divorced energy of all time. Clearly at the beginning of this, they were fucking. They are giving such divorce energy because Castiel is like, he knows him better than anybody, and he's there even though he's high all the time and doesn't give a shit. He is like in the planning meetings and is like, oh, I know about. I'm like, what is going on? Like,
there's something strange.
Yeah, and it's divorce. Like, like they are giving. They have hate-filled divorce sex at least once a month. in this fucked up compound.
I agree. And I think that that's why Cass immediately clocked that wasn't current Dean. Because he's like, oh, he doesn't have this air of just negative energy towards me that this one does.
Yeah.
It's just a weird level of horniness that I still need to unpack.
And it does get worse. So, I just burped, sorry. Our Dean is like, oh, so we're back to torture now. And future Dean is like, we have to do what we have to do. And he shows them a map of where they have to go. And Cass is like, that's a hot zone. There's a bunch of, they call them croats. We can't get into it. And demons. And he's like, we can't just like rush up up the driveway. And future Dean is like, oh, well, are you coming? And Cass is like, of course I'm coming. But, you know, why is past Dean get to come? And future Dean does not answer. And he's like, but he's coming. And Cass is like, okay, whatever. Clearly, they've had debates like this before. This is giving divorced argument in many ways. And him and Risa leave to gather the other soldiers. And Dean,
there's also a scene in this situation, I think this happens here, where like Dean says, I think it's when they're talking about the torture, and past Dean is like, oh, so we're into torture now, that's a cool thing that we're into, and Cass like laughs at that.
Oh yeah.
Current and future Dean is like, what? And Cass is like, what? I like past you. Like, I'm like, they are giving divorced so much. Like, it is insane.
It's crazy. Like, there was an era where there were a lot of fanfics from this alternate timeline of the two of them in the Croatoan universe, because they definitely fucked. He's like, I like past you in a way to be like, and I don't like present you. I'm like, oh, God. The energy that they have is insane. In any universe, in any timeline, they have an insane dynamic.
Listen, I don't get into RPF, but I definitely get why people are like, yeah, there's some weird drama there. There's some weird tension.
Once they have left, Dean says to his future self, he's like, yeah, why do you want me to come along? Because if I get killed, you're dead. And future Dean is like, it's because I want you to see. I want you to see everything. He's like, what? He's like, I want you to see what happened to Sam. And Dean's like, I thought Sam died. And he's like, no, he didn't die, but he's gone. But he did say the big yes. And Dean's like, what yes? He's like, oh, the big yes. And he's like, to being Lucifer's vessel? And he's like, yeah. And I have to kill my brother. And Dean is like, huh? He would never say that. And they have this insane conversation where future Dean is like, I want you to see this because you not saying yes to being Michael's vessel is what makes all this happen. And Dean's like, well, the battle would kill everybody. And future Dean is like, well, half the planet is better than no planet, and see what's going on. Everyone's dying. And that's what we have now. And Dean is like, you know, why haven't you said yes eventually? And future Dean is like, I tried to. I prayed. I begged. And the angels, they gave up and they left. And Dean is like, there has to be another way. And future Dean he says, oh God, he goes, I know. And he's like, yeah, and I know that. And I know that you won't. He's like, but I know. He's like, you have to say yes, but I know you won't. And that's why I know I'm going to be here. And you're like, oh my God. I just have to cut in here and say, this exact plot line happens in Sailor Moon.
So in what way? In what way?
Her future self speaks to her and is like, hey, because you refuse to kill this person because of your unending love for everybody, I am now trapped in an endless battle between light and dark for the rest of eternity, and I'm trying to stop that battle because I didn't have the courage to do it in the past, and so the only thing I can do now is send myself back into the past to try and convince you to make a better choice. And then her past version of her is like, no, and she's like, but that would mean that it would destroy everyone. And her past version of her is like, no, I can't do that because I love everybody too much. And she's like, yeah, I knew you would say that, but I thought I had to try. And you're like, that's
Sailor Dean, so true.
Sailor Cosmos Dean Winchester. I'm just gonna refer to them as Sailor Moon and Sailor Cosmos from now on. No, and you're gonna be like, Klaudia, I don't remember that happening in Sailor Moon. That's right, because the anime did not adapt that part. It did in the new 2 movies, Sailor Moon Cosmos, that you can watch now on Netflix. That is from the manga. That's who Sailor Chibi Chibi is. So can someone draw Dean Winchester with the little heart buns? Anyway, sorry.
I love sitting here not knowing much about Sailor Moon, just being like, what the fuck? So true.
Yeah. It's actually a really beautiful scene in Sailor Moon where she's like talking to her younger self about how like, oh, the struggle was worth it. It makes me cry every time. Anyway, this scene is crazy, insane. We cut then to, and this is interesting. We cut to them going to leave, and Chuck, who's staying behind,
Chuck, when I catch you, fuck you, Chuck.
Chuck is talking to our Dean and is like, okay, if you're from 2009, I want you to make sure that you start hoarding toilet paper. And as someone who lived through the year 2020, that's just very hilarious. He's like, that shit is like gold. And then we cut to them getting in the car, and who's riding shotgun to Destiel but our present Dean? That's like, huh? And Dean turns to Cass and he's like, okay, historically you were kind of uptight about like, you know, sex and drugs. What happened? And Cass is like, girl, life happened. And I'm no longer an angel. I don't know. It's all gone. And Dean's like, what do you mean? He's like, I don't know. I rebelled, and then the angels left, and all my mojo's gone. And I'm basically human. Cass is like, yeah, I miss being an angel. I'm depressed. And he's like, well, why the hell not bury myself in women and decadence if the world is ending? And if you remember the line in the previous episode where he's like, last night on Earth, what are you going to do? Whatever. And I just have to reiterate again, in every timeline, Dean has changed him. In every timeline.
Oh, it's so fucking dark out here.
So dark.
I also, you know,
He starts this conversation because he's driving and he just starts taking pills, and Dean takes the container and it's like, what is this? And he's like, amphetamines? He's like, damn, shit, okay.
It's like fun, Cass.
Yeah, he's like, damn, addicted to prescription drugs, Cass. And I'm like, how is Cass getting prescription drugs and weed when they can't get toilet paper?
Well, he's using his last angelic powers to perform a miracle, and they're like, Cass, please, can we get some, like, something really helpful, like fresh water? And he's like, amphetamines.
I love that about him. So they also, he makes this joke about, Dean makes this joke of like, well, welcome to the Human Mortal Club. And Cass is like, yeah, I used to be part of a better club. Now look at where I am.
I actually have one last thing to say.
Oh.
So as you all may recall, Ben Edlund, who's the writer of this episode, producer of Supernatural, did talk about how there was a lot of Destiel subtext that was intentional, that was put in on purpose. And this episode, they had to specifically tone it down. And one of the things that we know is in this episode, in this conversation, in the episode, it says, Cass says, I used to, like, he's like, I used to be a part of a much better club, and now I'm powerless, I'm hapless, I'm hopeless. I mean, why the hell not bury myself in women in decadence, right? It's the end, baby. That's just how I roll. But in the original script, it says, but instead I became this. The only thing I think we have left, Dean and me, is each other. If Dean says it's time to go out in a blaze of glory, win or lose, so be it. I'm in. But then, that's just how I roll.
Like, we have textual proof that they took scenes that were gay and then turned it into, I like women! Like, it's so crazy making.
I just, Ben Edlund, I'll give you anything. I'll give you my life.
Season 16, baby. Just knowing that was the line, that was like finding out the original Gojo and Geto line, that what it was supposed to be, and during the breakup, like, it was like that. Like, I was like, what do you mean? It's like that. Anyway, I'm thinking about deleted Destiel scenes, but we must persevere. We must persevere. So, we cut to, they have now arrived the next morning into this city. Clearly, it's been emptied. They search, they locate this building that they need to break into. And Future Dean, Risa, and Castiel, they're like checking their weapons, whatever. And Future Dean is like, okay, you guys go in through this second story window. And Risa's like, I don't know about this plan. And her and Cass are like, I don't know. And Future Dean is like, just trust me. Like, they'll never see us coming. And our Dean senses that something is wrong and pulls Future Dean away. And he's like, I know that you're lying to everybody. I've seen your lying expressions in the mirror. And I'm like, when do you lie to yourself in the mirror? But like, oh, okay. But then again,
when he looks at himself in the mirror and says, man, I can't wait to meet some beautiful women today.
I love women. And he's like, I know you're lying. And Future Dean's like, what are you talking about? Okay, fine. He's like, I know the path to Lucifer. I know it's a trap because this place should be crawling with infected people and demons, and they've clearly cleared a path for us. He's like, yeah, the people in the front are going to be a diversion, and we're going to sneak in the back. And our Dean is like, wait, you're going to sacrifice? And the phrasing here is very important. So important. He says, you're going to sacrifice your friends and Cass? So what is Cass to you then?
I think that it's the implication is that our Dean is not yet friends with Cass. And I think it's also like, he can tell that there's some weird vibes going on. Yeah. So he's like, I don't know if you guys are friends, but I do think it's funny that he counted him separate. Regardless of how you interpret it, he knew there was something weird going on.
Yeah. Our Dean is just mortified, and he's like, you see them as a means to an end. And Future Dean is like, no, like, they understand we have to do whatever it takes. And that kind of thinking is why we're in the state that we're in right now. And my job is to kill Lucifer. And our Dean tries to stop him, and he's like, what are you going to do? And Future Dean just punches him unconscious. It's kind of funny, I'm not going to lie. Also, it says that they're at this place called Jackson County Sanitarium. I'm like, what is still called a sanitarium even in 2014? But okay. We cut to Dean. He wakes up on the ground in the grass, and he wakes up to gunfire coming from the second floor. And he runs around the building, and lo and behold, who does he see in a pristine white suit? Is Sam, no wait, Lucifer in Sam's body, who has Future Dean pinned under his foot, like a foot on his neck. He then snaps his neck and kills him, Future Dean. And past Dean looks horrified. And Lucifer's like, hi, Dean. And our Dean is like, why don't you just kill me now too? And Lucifer's like, why would I do that? That'd be redundant. I just killed you. And he's like, oh, this must be so traumatizing for you to like see you in, you know, in your brother's body, but you know, it's the only way that things could have been this way. And I will say, Jared is eating it up in this scene. He ate it up.
See, I thought it kind of sucked, but I don't think that. Here's the thing: I don't think his performance sucked. I think the way they just hadn't figured out how they were gonna write Lucifer as a character yet.
Oh yeah.
So it was like the way he talked was so different from how we had seen Lucifer talked when he was played by other people, like when he's played by Mark Pellegrino. It just feels like two different characters, you know?
Yeah, which I guess is fine because this is like an alternate timeline. But Lucifer tries to put his hand on Dean's shoulder, and Dean's like, "Don't touch me." And he's like, "You want to deep fry the planet? Like, why do you want to keep me alive?" And Lucifer's like, "Why would I want to destroy this beautiful planet? It's the last perfect handiwork of God." And it's proof that I was right about mankind, because look at what you people have done to this beautiful planet. And he's like, Dean, do you know how I fell from grace? And Dean's like, don't let this be story time. The funny part about this, and he basically, he's like, I fell because I loved God the most. I loved him completely. And then God created humans, you people, and told us to love them even more and to bow down to them. And I said, I refuse to bow down. And God cast me down for not loving these hairless apes more than him. And does the punishment fit the crime? And he had Michael cast me into hell for that. And Dean does this whole, like, I'm not buying this sympathy for the devil crap. He's like, he says, the only difference between you and the monsters I've been hunting and killing my whole life is the size of your ego. And I will say, I'm like, Dean, maybe you should have gone to Sunday school, because I'll give him this. He is correct. Like, that is what happened. But all right. And Lucifer is like, I like you. I see you. I get what the other angels see in you. And I'm like, oh, which angels? Oh, so everybody knows? Everybody knows. Even Lucifer knows. Everybody knows. I wrote in my notes, oh, I'm sure.
Oh my god, I feel bad because I feel like I'm not saying anything, but I'm like, you're saying everything I need that needs to come across.
And Lucifer's like, okay, goodbye, we'll see you again soon. And he starts to walk away, and Dean yells after him, and he's like, just kill me now then, or else I'll find a way to kill you. And Lucifer's like, oh, I know. And I also know that you're not going to say yes to Michael. And I know that you'd never kill Sam. No matter what you do, no matter what you change, no matter what choices you make, we are always going to end up here. And I'm always going to win. And Dean is crying at this point, and he's like, no, you're wrong. And Lucifer's just like, aw, well, see you in 5 years, Dean. And he disappears. And then Dean turns around and sees Zachariah behind him. And Zachariah, like, touches his forehead and zaps him back to the present in his hotel room.
This shot is really funny, too, because Zachariah, Dean turns around, he's there, and it zooms in on him really fast.
Yeah,
like, that was so weird.
Yeah. We're back in the present in the motel room, and Dean is like, oh, okay, ghost of Christmas, screw you. It's quite funny. And the angel is like, okay, did you see? This is what's going to happen. And you are the only one who can prove the devil wrong. Just say yes. And Dean is like, how do I know that this isn't one of your tricks? Like, you've done this to me before. Which, fair. And Zachariah's like, well, the time for tricks is over. And I'm like,
yeah, there's also so much debate in the fandom, and there always was, like, I remember being a debate, like, when I was into it originally, of, like, did this actually happen or not? Like, was this future real?
Yeah.
And, like, I think it probably was real. It's implied that it was real, but, like, I do think it's a good question of being like,
Yeah. And Zachariah's like, Dean, you have to give yourself to Michael before billions of people die, before Lucifer gets to Sam. And Dean looks kind of sad, and he's like, maybe it looks like he's going to say yes. And then he just goes, nah. And Zachariah's like, you haven't learned your lesson? And Dean is like, yeah, I did learn a lesson, but it wasn't the one that you wanted to teach me. And Zachariah's like, fine, then I'll teach it to you again. And he
oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
So, and he moves towards Dean, and he's like, I've got you where you want you, and I'm never gonna let you go. And then suddenly, Dean has been zapped to the side of the road with Castiel standing next to him. And Zachariah is pissed. And they are standing on this roadside. And Dean is shocked. And he's like, oh my god, excellent timing. And Cass just looks at him like he holds the world, the stars in his hands, and goes, we had an appointment.
And I'm like, we have never seen this motherfucker smile as much as we have, like, in the season that we've known him so far. He is smiling up a storm. It is freaking crazy.
Like, and this is the second time Castiel has saved Dean, okay? Like, I feel, we had an appointment. I have to kill myself. Like, what do you mean?
No, it's so sick. It's so sick. Oh my god. And the way that Dean is looking at him, the way they are looking at each other is like, oh my god.
Dean puts his hand on Cass's shoulder, and in the wiki it says on his angel friend's shoulder. Okay? So they're friends now, canonically. And he says, don't ever change. What?
Oh, because, it's
and Cass, okay, so Cass is like, how did Zachariah find you? And Dean's like, okay, it's a long story, but we need to steer clear of Jehovah's Witnesses. I love a dig at Jehovah's Witnesses. I think that was funny.
Yeah.
And he takes out his phone and he starts to dial. And Cass is like, what are you doing? And he's like, something I should have done in the first place. And we cut to the side of a bridge, kind of off-road. Dean has parked. He's leaning up against the car. And Sam drives up to meet him. Sam has driven up in an equally, like, classic car. And you're like, how did he steal this? Why can't you just steal a Prius? Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Or like a Civic, or like, I don't know, a Corolla.
A Toyota
like
Corolla,
something,
yeah.
It's like, name a basic car. 3, 2, 1, Toyota Corolla.
Sam gets out and he goes up to Dean and he's looking kind of wary. And Dean takes out Ruby's knife, the demon knife. And he's like, if you really want back in, you're going to need this because you're probably rusty. And Dean apologizes to Sam. And he's like, even though we are each other's Achilles heel, all we've got is each other. And we have to stick together to keep each other human, which is a reference to the fact that, like, when he was in the future without Sam, he became soulless, basically. And they say, we make our own future. Guess we have no choice. And then the episode ends.
Listen, do I think some of the interpersonal stuff between Sam and Dean in this season is fucking stupid? Yes.
Yeah.
Do I think that this reunion was really sweet?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was nice.
Yeah.
It is the epitome, like we'd said at the beginning, these 2 episodes are the epitome of, like, man, this shit is dumb. Oh my god, Destiel! Like, that's literally what is happening right now.
Yeah.
Ugh.
We had an appointment. Oh! If nothing else, look up that scene. The we had an appointment scene. The way he looks at him is like, takes your breath away. It's in every edit.
No. And it's like, what else? I feel like we've gotten so into it, but I think it's also interesting because the times that Sam makes an ally, they're always some fuck-ass crazy person. And then the time that Dean makes an ally, he's like, this is my man now. Like, Sam, I've said it in a previous episode, but I'm like, do you think Sam is low-key jealous that he's like, well, Ruby turned on me, but you get to keep Cass. Whoa, fuck you, Dean. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is there anything else we have to add? I feel like we've already said enough.
Yeah, I know we talked about how if it was an alternate universe or not. In the wiki, it says that Ben Edlund has said that in his mind, the end is an alternate reality similar to the French Mistake.
Ugh,
So
don't
like,
talk about the
oh
French
god.
Mistake. The way that sorry, I just remembered the French Mistake is one of like the highest rated episodes of this show, which drives me insane.
Like, why?
This is also when we really start to get like, okay, we're actually like on track for the show. Like, we're actually on track for this season. We've gotten all the weird bullshit out of the way. Sam and Dean are on the same page. Cass is like a friend now.
Yeah.
Like, we're really starting to, and like all the establishing things, like they've learned a lot of the establishing information. So it's like, we're ready to hit the road.
Yeah, which is what makes it even more infuriating when they basically have to make up reasons for Cass to be separated from them in the following seasons because Misha isn't a series regular. They should have made him a series regular earlier. Not to advocate for Misha Collins being employed, but they should have just made him a season regular earlier because it was getting fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, there's especially, I will say, like during like season 9 and 10, when they are like refused to make him Cass like a main cast member, dude.
That was like, dumb.
No, there's so much stupid shit that happens. It's like, no, why the fuck is my boy working at a convenience store? Like, what are you talking about?
Why is he working at a convenience store? Why can't he stay in the bunker? Damn, we haven't gotten to the bunker yet.
Oh my god, I just remembered we haven't gotten to the bunker yet. That's fucking crazy. Okay.
Fucking bunker.
Well, I think that's enough from us today. You've heard us speak enough. We need to go decompress.
Yeah, we need to go think about Destiel in quiet silence.
Yeah, a lot like Cass when he was like, I'm just going to sit here in the quiet and think. Like, that's going to be us. But thank you for listening. We always appreciate it. You can follow us on social media. We're at Mystery Spotcast on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Tumblr. You can email us at themysteryspotcast@gmail.com. As a reminder, we are trying to get Mohammed's fundraiser for his family to escape Gaza to 10K. So if you could check that out, that'd be wonderful. It's in the show notes. Rate and review on Rated Review. What the heck? Leave us a review. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. Leave a comment on our YouTube channel. All that stuff. We always appreciate it. We do have a fic recommendation form that you can fill out. So if you have a fan fiction about Supernatural that you like, send it our way because we want to read it. We also have a podcast called RuPaul's Pod Race. We are doing some really fun stuff for the upcoming, Halloween spooky season. So please check it out. We really appreciate it. And we will see you 2 Tuesdays from now for more slaying people, queer baiting things, the supernatural business.